Welcome to Eliminating the Noise Strategies for Effective Learning in a Distracted World. I'm Matt Pittman, a principal analyst with the Brandon Hall Group, and I'm excited to have with me Steve Thompson, Chief Learning Officer from 5app. Steve is an award-winning people leader with 28 years of experience in learning, talent, and organizational development. Now as CLO at 5app, he specializes in using learning technologies to align business and people strategies that foster learning cultures that maximize business outcomes. Hello, Steve.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here.
I'm excited about this conversation because I think that learning is poised to become even more critical to businesses in 2024 than even we could have imagined. We know this because we recently conducted our 2024 HCM Outlook study. And what you can take from this is that almost everything is increasing in investment. And then one of my favorite data points, because I lived it, in our Voice of the Customer survey that we ran last year, how many LMSs are in your organization? And what we learned is that 38%, more than a third of respondents, have more than one LMS. So it adds to the complexity. So what we want to know is, where does the noise come from in your world and work?
Plentiful. Noise comes from every single direction. It's very easy to look at it through the learning lens, and all those various initiatives, growing technology, the pace of growth in that space. From a learning perspective, when we're looking to really drive through, whether it be a program or a piece of learning or content, how do you navigate that? How do you make sure that your piece of learning marketing or your initiative is seen?
Future proofing the skills. Lots of people talking about AI, but not understanding it. Simplifying the learner experience. That's where the culture of the organization and the learning culture specifically begins to be very important. So we asked you as you registered for the webinar to give us your thoughts on that. Does your current learning culture empower people to take charge of their own development, which can help kind of manage through that? And as you might expect, Steve, it's a little bit of a normal curve where about a fourth, a little bit more than a fourth, are very much uh, have protecting a learning culture that empowers people to take charge of their development. Why is that so important, do you think?
What really resonates is that leadership buy-in, but it's not only the leadership buying into what it is that we're presenting as a learning strategy, but it's how are they role modeling? Let's be honest here, that there's no magic bullet. And this isn't something that you can turn up on a Monday and then by Friday do these 3 points, you've got your learning culture. This is turning the oil tanker, but it starts with that vision. It starts with, where do we need to go?
So we asked you a couple of other questions on the registration process. And so one of those was, what data are you tracking to prove learning's business impact? And again, this can become, in my experience, quite a source of noise.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a lot of a lot to be said, in terms of evaluating and getting to that point of business impact. But again, I would overlay this maturity piece. Learning completion, satisfaction, it have been termed, and maybe rightly termed as vanity metrics. Way of thinking about it. If you go and watch a stand-up comic, you're going to be incredibly engaged with the act, and will laugh. An hour later, try and recall one of the gags, what one of the jokes.
And then the last one, to what extent are you leveraging the full capability of your current learning technology? And I know that you and I talked about this one a little bit prior, Steve.
A lot of it is about functionality. It can do this, it can do that, it can do everything. It can make a cup of tea or whatever it may be. But is functionality king? I have a question around that, purely from my experience, because the other way to take the comparison, you kind of need your learning technology to do what it says on the tin. Is there a question here, or maybe a challenge, that our learning technology incredibly powerful, but maybe there's too much functionality or lack of education in terms of how to leverage that?
And so, really, the bottom line of all of this is there's a lot going on and there's a lot expected of us as learning leaders and learning professionals. And so, Steve, you're going to tell us a story about how to cut through all of this noise. So, I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away.
Thanks, Matt. And if everybody's sitting comfortably, I will begin. My previous life before I joined 5app, I was a senior director of learning for Greystar, who are a global real estate organization. So my remit coming into Greystar was effectively to build a learning function from scratch. What was really important for me was to really start to think about the vision and the strategy for learning at Greystar. And a component part of that was around brand. What is it that we wanted to be known for? So for me, very simply, it was around quality and it was around trust. Priority number one was to get some content, and that partner that we landed with was Hemsey Fraser. What I really needed after that is a way to deploy it. How can we deliver this content to our population? So as part of that vision, created this phrase that I'm sure we hear frequently, which is around creating the right content that's available to the right people at point of need. And I needed a platform that could do that. And that's where the connection and where the relationship with 5app came. So we leverage their platform. So we launched to the background of a huge pomp and circumstance in April 2019. We launched that across UK and our European locations. Business school, as we branded it internally, engagement went through the roof. And it stayed there for 3 months. And then it absolutely fell off a cliff. So actually creating a learning platform and implementing it is actually the easy bit. Creating stickiness and ongoing engagement and impact is the challenge. So as we travel along the timeline, as we look at it, we've got a light bulb moment here. So I started looking at it through a different lens. And this was at the time, it was about June, I think 2019. And in the UK, we were swapping out our Prime Minister, and Boris Johnson, you may be familiar with, took office. And if you are familiar with Boris, you'll also be aware that there's a plethora of comedic video clips of Boris. And what we did to mark the occasion of the changing Prime Minister, we took one of these comedic clips and we loaded it into the platform. We then started to link and underpin all the relevant learning. So for that particular example, it was leaders and managing in transition, influencing, assertiveness, any applicable learning we put against that piece of news. And what we saw was a slow uptick in terms of engagement. The other thing that we noticed is that people then started filtering out through the platform. So the culture that I was looking to drive and create was a self-directed learning culture, and this was just the embryo, if you like, of that starting to emerge. We then really started to pivot in terms of creating our own internal content. So recognizing our starting point was using external content through Hemsey Fraser, but Greystar as an organization, from a knowledge and from a technical perspective, it's quite niche. It's not necessarily the kind of content that you can go out to the marketplace and buy. So there's a real opportunity for us to start creating our own content. We started really engaging with our business, with those subject matter experts, and we started plugging them in and downloading and then creating the content. But we got so good at it that we were creating content rapidly. And this is where this whole concept of noise really started to come to the fore with me. And we've got loads of content. We've got leadership programs, we've got mentoring programs, and it goes on and on and on. So the point here, this was the crossroads where our learning academies suddenly came to life, because we needed a way to start navigating that, because as much as we were creating this great learning brand, this great proposition, and we were gaining traction, actually my biggest competitor was people's time. We were working very closely with our operations part of the business, very large part of the business, but a huge advocate for what we were doing. But the challenge is, how do we upskill them in the flow of work? How do we increase that level of competence and capability, i.e. the skills, knowledge, and technical element at pace? So there's a number of challenges there that contributed to the creation of this learning architecture. And those were the measures that we used. We launched those learning academies. We additionally created an onboarding academy. Because of the success of the operations academy, we then had marketing, we had development, we had investment knocking at the door saying, we'd like this academy for our functions. But going back to my earlier point around learning culture, and there's no three bullet points on how to nail it. We've got a timeline here and an evolution of how we created that self-directed learning culture and the various steps along the way to achieve that. But for me, the key pull out here is really going back to basics, which is understanding who your customer is, understanding who your learner is. How do they learn? How do they want to learn? What do they need to learn? And creating a way that they can get that at speed, at point of need. We've got functional academies along the bottom, and we've got the skills, knowledge, and technical components. So the reason why we focus on this, and we take finance as an example. So if you're an accountant within finance, what your specific development pathway within your academy will give you is all the skills, knowledge, and technical content and training that you need to be the best you that you can be. When we then look above that, where we've got leadership, DEI, well-being, onboarding, this is purely an example, and it's also, you know, limitless in terms of what these academies can be. But these are holistic. It also enables people to collaborate from other parts of the business, so you've got that that breadth and diversity of thought. So how do we actually approach it? You know, what's the blueprint on how you do this? Well, it was around identifying those subject matter experts, really drilling down to the individual role and the requirements of each individual role. Their skills, knowledge, and technical the pathways were going to look different. It was important that we could differentiate. So we did a matrix activity. And then the most important part for us is that we then mapped the content. This is the output that we had. So this data was collected from a pilot group of 100 people with a pre-assessment 6 months before launch, and then 6 months post. And then you've got your knock on and you feed into the NPS uptick as well. And this was the springboard for us as an organization that really answered that question in terms of cutting through that noise, delivering the content to the right people at the right time, but also demonstrating that actually you can really align very closely a learning approach and a learning proposition to the needs of the business. So where does that bring us now? Well, what we've effectively done is we've productionized 6 years of learning. There is a product here that or is a solution on so many levels, whether that be a platform challenge, content, personalizing the learner experience, driving and increasing that learner engagement, or very simply, you know, how do you sell it into your business? So, but it's there as a product, you know, for people to leverage. So thanks for taking the time to jump on and listening to the case study and the journey and where we are now.
Thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, team.